Hello and welcome back to Ticker Talks. Together with Polaron Language Services, we are looking to use language to connect communities. And whilst Polaron is the sponsor of our program, all views and opinions in the following program are of course our own. And before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that this segment is being held on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and I pay my respects to elders both past, present, and of course future. I'm joined by Director of Polaron Language Services, Eva Hussein. Welcome back, thank you.
Hello, hello, hello.
Now, what's been happening at Polaron this week? You've always got something interesting going on.
We do. Thank you, Mike. So today we're showcasing a project we did a little while ago for the Asylum Seekers Resource Centre into several languages, and we've been working with this wonderful organisation for some years on providing translation and interpreting services. So this particular one, I think we did 5 or 6 languages there, and you can see it on the screen. Beautiful design, not by us, but we put the words into whatever our clients produce.
Yeah, fantastic, excellent. I was going to ask who did the graphics for you because I like those drawings there.
Very cute.
But let's touch on miscommunication. You always bring something interesting. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're a little more serious. What's happened this week in miscommunication? And
today they're a bit naughty. I hope we can use that word on air. It's not too bad. But we wanted to showcase how not to do communication. This is in the context, this happened a couple of years ago in America actually, but in the context of using platforms like Google Translate and why you shouldn't use it unless you want to get the gist of something. So there on the screen you can see where the immigration services in America have used Google Translate to screen people coming into the country.
Important.
So this is where the naughty word comes in. So if I was to say to you, son of a bitch, in some languages that means puppy. So this is how machine translation understands words. It doesn't understand the context, it understands words and doesn't always get it right. But in this instance, the American authorities screened people from coming into the country. In this instance, there were refugees and asylum seekers, and not a good thing to do.
Not a good thing to do, no, lessons learnt there. All right, well, let's get into our main topic today. We've got some great guests, and our main topic for today, this week we're discussing the situation in Afghanistan, a humanitarian crisis that is affecting millions of people. As countries are no longer able to evacuate people from Afghanistan, many have been left behind, and those who are being settled in Australia are being faced with unimaginable trauma of extreme violence, the bereavement of their country and loved ones, and those they have had to leave behind. The Australian government has evacuated over 4,000 people from Afghanistan and is offering a minimum of 3,000 visas for Afghan refugees. But is this enough? Germany alone has offered up to resettle up to 40,000 Afghan refugees, and many Australians are calling on the government to offer more asylum seekers a place to call home. So today we're bringing in several special guests, starting with Paul Power, the CEO at the Refugee Council of Australia, who was recently named the advisory panel for Australia's resettlement of Afghan nationals. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Excellent. And we've also got Asadullah Kurami, who is a Migration Support Program Team Leader at the Australian Red Cross, who has also worked as an interpreter for the International Security Assistance Force in Afghanistan. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
No worries at all. And we've got BARAT Ali BATOOR, an organiser for people seeking asylum at the Asylum Seekers Resource Centre. His family was driven out of Afghanistan during the Civil War, and he now works as a photographer, drawing the world's attention to the plight of the Afghani people. Welcome back to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
No worries. So Paul, I'll start with you. We've been watching the unfolding disaster in Afghanistan, of course here at Ticker News as well. The vision's been everywhere, and wishing we could do more to help people who now find themselves in a lot of danger. And our hearts go out especially to interpreters and translators, some of whom are still stuck there. What is the role of the Refugee Council of Australia during a crisis such as this?
Yeah, well, the Refugee Council is a national association of non-government organisations that work on refugee issues. We're not involved in direct services ourselves, but we're involved in understanding issues are for the frontline service and are involved in providing direct feedback to the Australian government about the concerns that people are raising and the issues which need to be addressed. As you mentioned, I've just been drafted onto the federal government's advisory panel on the Australian resettlement council, so it provides an opportunity to provide direct and honest feedback about the concerns that Afghan Australians and non-government organisations that are working with Afghan refugees and the diaspora in Australia, to be able to raise those concerns directly with the Australian government. And also, we're very directly involved in supporting the advocacy of the broader Australian community on refugee issues, and have, particularly since the fall of Kabul to the Taliban, have been very strongly advocating for a much larger humanitarian commitment than the government has so far committed to.
Yeah, Bharat, I'll bring you in now. And the role of the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre during this conflict, how does your work as a photographer help shed light on what is happening over in Afghanistan?
Thank you very much. The Asylum Seeker Resource Centre has been a great help to the community, to the Afghani community in Australia, to amplify their voices, to reach it to the wider Australian community and to the politicians, to make the government or the politician to act on the ask of the Australian Afghani community. So as a photographer, my role has been effective because I have first-hand experience of documenting the lives of people in Afghanistan, and I have covered range of issues in the country, so which gives me the opportunity to advocate and raise awareness. What are the challenges? Some of the challenges after the fall of Kabul, when the people are living under the Taliban, and what are the some of the risks that people might be facing in coming days and weeks once the attention is over and the whole media and world is engaged with other stuff.
Absolutely striking photos as well, by the way. And Asadullah, how is the Red Cross helping to support recent Afghan refugees in Australia as well? I understand there's been a big effort.
The Red Cross Humanitarian Settlement Program is supporting the new evacuees out of Afghanistan to settle and feel at home in Australia. We are providing humanitarian settlement support in Western Australia and also in some of the eastern states and regions. We provide basic and immediate support on arrival whilst the clients, the refugees, are in hotel quarantine. And we work with the state government here as well together to support them and provide the psychosocial and emotional support whilst at quarantine, providing material aid support under our phase 1 delivery of services. And once we have taken them over from the hotel quarantine, after 14 days, we provide ongoing and case management support for them to settle down in here, connected to the wider communities and receive services, have access to mainstream services, and help them integrate into the communities, and make them feel at home. Of course, it's a very difficult journey for a lot of them, and we have a specialized team of case management and bilingual support workers who are assisting these people and providing culturally and religiously appropriate services for them.
Fantastic. That's a very rounded response. I love that. Paul, back to you. A recent federal government inquiry recommended introducing a new community-sponsored refugee program for Afghan refugees. What would this look like, and what can maybe we all do to help, the audience included?
Sure. Yeah, the federal government inquiry recommended that Australia look at revising the current model of community sponsorship. Currently, the federal government has a community support program, which is a very expensive sponsorship arrangement, and the cost for a sponsor can be upwards of $100,000 to support the resettlement of a family of 5 to Australia, which is much more expensive than any other equivalent program in other parts of the world. What the Refugee Council of Australia and a number of other organisations have been interested in for quite some years is the process that's been in place in Canada since the late 1970s. And more than 300,000 refugees have been supported by Canadian communities over 40 years to come to Canada, with the sponsors covering the living costs for up to 12 months for new arrivals. And the sort of financial commitment is less than a third of what the Australian has been asking through its current program. But I mean, what that does is it provides deeper opportunities for ordinary citizens to get involved in providing direct support to newly arrived refugees. And the success of the program in Canada, we believe, can be more than equalled in Australia, because there are millions of Australians who are interested in Australia doing more than it currently is to support refugee and humanitarian entrance. So we're waiting to see whether or not the federal government will move towards a new model of community sponsorship soon. But also, there are opportunities for people to get involved, as volunteers.
I'll just go back to BARAT. How is the Afghan Australian community feeling about what is happening at the moment? Paul made some great predictions there for what could happen, but how's it looking at the moment?
We had a very devastating situation in Afghanistan, and yesterday we heard the news of the fall of Panjshir, which was the last resistance post in Afghanistan. But there are a lot of scares and fears among the people that things can go even worse in coming days and weeks, and there are a lot of concerns within the Afghani diaspora community in Australia as well, because a lot of people they have their loved ones and close relatives trapped in Afghanistan, and they haven't been able to help them in any way to evacuate and to get them into a safer place. So there are a lot of concerns and fears among the people, both in Afghanistan and in Australia.
Yeah, no doubt it's an ongoing situation. And Asadullah, you worked as an interpreter between 2006 to 2010 in Afghanistan. What was your experience of fleeing Afghanistan and settling here as a refugee, just to wrap us up?
The experience of fleeing Afghanistan was extremely hard decision for me to make. I love my country, and I loved it. I dedicated my service and my life to this country and to the land and the people of it, to work in Afghanistan and serve the people towards a stable Afghanistan and a democratic state. But unfortunately, we came to the conclusion that there are bigger issues behind the scene that we are not aware of, and we were being targeted for what we did in there. The level of threat for people that had worked alongside this international security forces, including myself, was really immense. And the day that I left the regional provinces that I was working at, and my last flight was from Bamiyan to Kabul, it was a very emotional time for me to say goodbye to the country and flee. And this was just a very hard decision, and I had to make the hard decision to flee my country, the country that I was born in and raised in, and the country that I had given sacrifices, and hundreds and thousands of other people like me. I had to make the hard decision for the safety of my family and myself, and I fled to Pakistan, and then from Pakistan to Indonesia, and then I got on a boat and arrived to Australia in 2010. So that's a brief story of my journey fleeing the country.
Asadullah, thank you for sharing that with us. And to all of our guests for today, that's all we've got time for. But I wanted to thank you all for coming on the program and discussing this very important issue, this very heavy issue. So again, thanks to all of you and to all the audience for tuning in. Eva, I might just get you to summarise for me. You always bring in the best guests.
No, aren't they just the best? And look, I think we got a very good roundup of what's happening out there, and there's a sense of hope, at least for me, hearing what work goes on out there, and also hearing some of the lived experiences of people that have gone through some really tough times, but they're here in Australia on the ground, facilitating arrival of more people that are in trouble. Basically, as a human race, we do need to be more accepting and embrace this crisis that's within a crisis. We are dealing with COVID, but like watching some of the footage is just shocking. So I'm very pleased that there is work happening out there, and for the sake of interpreters and translators that have worked there, we do want to bring them all back in and into Australia, not back, they've never been probably. But make it a bit easier than what it has been for some of the other people that have gone through this process themselves.
Especially those who've helped out outside and all of this.
So I feel positive, and thank you to the guests.
Good, yeah, same. Having the discussion is a very important part of it, so yeah. Now guys, if you have any questions about how to reach your multicultural audiences, get in touch with the team at Polaron. Contact details are on the screen, and thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Ticket Talks. It was an important one. I'm Mike Loder. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Stay safe.